Later on in the last week, I had a chance to sit down and talk with Theo Fleury and Kim Barthel. In 2009, Theo Fleury became a best-selling author when he released his book, Playing with Fire, where he detailed some traumatic events from earlier in his life. He now has his second book coming out with Kim Barthel. It's a discussion of sorts, just the two of them sitting down and talking and working through his issues. It goes in deep to neuroscience and everything that can be changed in the way a brain works after severe trauma. So here's part one of my two-part interview with Theo Fleury and Kim Barthel. Just started off with the book, Conversations with the Rattlesnake. And I've watched a few interviews that you've done, Theo, and you talk about the rattlesnake, and you talk about it being something that's involved with your country music, but it's also more than that. So if you could just get into detail about what it means, the rattlesnake.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we wanted to have a sort of a catchy title to, sort of pique everybody's interest. But, after we did more research about the rattlesnake, a rattlesnake sheds its skin, it transforms itself, and it reinvents itself. And, those of us who've had traumatic childhood experiences, that's sort of the way back to some health and normalcy and understanding of oneself.
Right now, Kim, the journey to that, a lot of talking, a lot of opening up, but there's a science behind it. And
oh, yeah.
Just explain that, because to me it's baffling.
Well, when you cut your finger,
yeah,
how you create a scar or you create a scab, your body has the ability to heal itself. Well, the brain has the same capacity. So when you have a trauma, all of these little nerves wire together inside your brain, and it creates what we call a network. And that's what gets triggered when you're in a traumatic experience. When you change that, you change that neural network.
And how does that work when you change it? You make decisions, you open up to people, and then you let those things off your shoulders?
Well, we have a saying, neurons that fire together wire together. And nerve cells that stop firing together stop wiring together. So how you think changes how your nerve cells wire together.
And Theo, these conversations for you, is it a constant process of continuing to get things off your shoulders, or does it get to a point where like it's all out there and I'm fine, or is it just a constant battle?
Yeah, well, when people say fine, they're not really fine. So I don't use the word fine anymore. But yeah, this is an ongoing process. The journey to discovering oneself and what makes us sort of tick is a lifelong experience. And so many people think they can book 4 sessions with their therapist or counselor or whatever it is, and at the end of those 4 sessions, I'm cured. Well, it doesn't work that way. This is a process, and because I think as a society, we're not very good at conversation, and so, and I've learned this through having my own conversations and how sort of I was wired around conversation, which is, I got to be this tough guy, and I got to keep everything inside, and I got to figure it out on my own. And you know where that got me? A fully loaded pistol in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger. That's where that got me. So having conversations and having conversations is the way to relieve oneself of, stuffing and, it's very detrimental to oneself to, sort of engage in that type of behavior. But society teaches us that that's the way that
Men specifically?
Well, for sure, men specifically, but...
well, and you used the word battle before, and so I picked up on that word, and it doesn't stay a battle, it becomes easier over time. It's just that it is ever present as a part of who you are. It's not that it ever really goes away, but the raw emotion of the battle doesn't stay the same over time.
Now let's talk about the conversation in itself and how long it took you guys to compile it, and really how raw it is. Like, how raw is the conversation in that book?
Pretty raw.
It's as raw as you can get it, Yeah. And, but, and I was like you. I was totally skeptical at the beginning about how conversation could actually rewire my brain, but, I don't think there's any way other than to do it that way. You know what I mean? Like, I've tried pills, I've tried, you know, EMDR. I've tried, you know, to work with a horse. I've tried to, you know, everything, you know, imaginable to mankind when it comes to the process of therapy. And what it came down to was, you know, I finally had a conversation with somebody who explained me better than I could explain myself.
And how does that make your personal relationship now, which has got to be a positive side effect of the process?
I mean, no question. But, you know, you use the word relationship, and, you know, the brain has certain pathways for relationship. And what happens in trauma is that those pathways are not accessed. So when you actually have a safe and caring relationship, those pathways get awakened. And that's what we mean by rewiring the brain.
Okay, and Theo, you've had many relationships through your life, and I've heard you say before that you don't hurt the people you don't care about, you hurt the people that you love.
Right.
And repairing those relationships, is that part of the process as well?
Absolutely, you know.
And how would you go about doing that?
Well, there's lots of conversations that need to take place, you know, because not only am I flawed, but the other person on the other side is flawed as well. So, you know, I think apologies are important, but what you do after the apology is way more important than actually saying you're sorry. And, you know, that means that when I say sorry, I mean it. And I go on to live it, breathe it, feel it, act it, you know, all the way through. And
Repair is an action, not a word.
And how do you hold yourself accountable to that? Like,
how do I hold my
sometimes it's easy for somebody to say, hey, I'm sorry about this. But
of course.
How do you make yourself go through with it? How do you follow up on your promises?
Well, there's the action part, right? So the sorry means that I'm going to try not to repeat the same behavior again, which means that, you know, I've had to go through all of the layers because the behavior is on the surface. So I've had to dig through all of the layers and figure out why it is that whenever I get triggered, that you're the one that gets hurt, right? So now I got to figure out what that is and think about it in a different way, talk about it to somebody so that I can relearn how to not repeat that behavior again.
And you know, that whole idea of holding yourself accountable requires mindfulness, that you're paying attention to what you think and what you feel and how people relate to you. You have to be awake and tuned in order to do that.